So here we can see on the sheets which relate to Sfiras Ha'ema, and the main mitzvah of Sfiras Ha'ema to count is derived from the Torah itself and the verses displayed on the screen. Usvartem lachem. Svartem lachem means you shall count. Lachem for yourselves. So that's the literal translation, and the exact translation literally, it says Memochras HaShabbos. It says, and as translated on the screen, the day after Shabbos. Now that is that expression, that translation, although being technically correct, in fact, as understood by our sages, means the day after the Yom Tov period, Shabbos being a Yom Tov period, not literally the day of Shabbos, because let's say if you would have Yom Tov being on a Monday, then that would mean that you would only start counting the next week. It doesn't mean that. It means the second day, or the day after the first day of Yom Tov in Israel, in the times of the temple. That would be the second day of the Pesach period. Then they would do the offering of the Omer offering, and that's what it says in the Hebrew. So I'll highlight the Hebrew. So you bring Esa Omer, you bring the Omer offering, and that is counted. Sheba Shabbos Tamimus is counted for a 7-week period. That is for 49 days, and then underlying again or emphasizing that it's done for at the completion of that ad Memochras Shabbos. That means at the completion of that Yom Tov of this counting, Tisra Chamishim Yom, they will have, and actually you will have counted 50 days, and that's why his English he's translated, you must count until the day after the 70th week, and that would then culminate on the 50th day, and then Ikravte Mincha Chadosha L'Hashem. Then you bring the offering of the Chadosha, which means the new grain. Well, that is also a matter of definition, but then you'll bring the new grain. So what is the Omer is a particular grain, and the Mincha Chadosha over here refers to another grain. And as we've discussed in previous opportunities, that at the Omer time, the grain that is brought is the barley grain, and that's the start of that period, at the start of the Omer period. And then Shavuos at the 50th day, because after counting the 49 days from Pesach, on the next 50th day is our festival of Shavuos.
Yeah.
And the agricultural offering of the time is the wheat offering, and as he said, the new grain over here, which is the wheat, the wheat grain. So this is the original. This is the source of our period of counting the Sfiras Ha'ema and counting the 7 weeks.
Yeah.
Zeroing in a little bit more closer to the idea of Lag BaOmer. Within that period, historically, events happened, and the day of Lag BaOmer was a special day, as some of the excerpts over here that we're going to look at next discuss in the Gemara. Okay. So Rabbi Akiva said that once someone who studied Torah in his youth should in fact study more Torah in his old age. If he had students in his youth, he should have additional students at his old age. As is stated, in the morning, that is in your strength, sow your seed, meaning to say, have put a lot of effort into your cultivation of your Torah and learning. Okay, and then we are told that Rabbi Akiva right, had many students. V'omro, and we said Shnaim Osa Elif, Zugim, he had, and again, the literal translation, 12,000 pairs of students, which means he had 24,000 students. And, and they were all very great students of the students of Rabbi Akiva. And you can imagine that their understanding was very great. Now, what happened further, as he's saying over there, and they were located in specific areas, but they were in the geography. They were located in between this area and that area, right? And then, but a great tragedy happened to them. And as the Gemara continues and says, "V'kulam meiso beperek echad," they all died in the one. Perik means a chapter in our understanding of text, but in this case, in all one period of time, in this one period of time, and a reason was given, mipnei shaloi nogo kovod zeh lezeh. And the reason is given as they all died in one period because they did not treat each other with respect. Now, this as a statement, we'll investigate further about how they did and what they did. It sounds to us inconceivable that if they were students of the caliber that Rabbi Akiva allowed them to be, and they were named in his yeshiva and under his guidance. And even though the number is so many, certainly Rabbi Akiva would know of his students and know of the greatness of his students. If they were students who could be called of the caliber students of Rabbi Akiva, somehow it sounds unimaginable that a plague happened, a pandemic, a pandemic happened, and that the reason given is that they didn't honor one each other. It sounds very large. So we have we have understandings of that, and we can address them possibly when we get in the end of our class, or as we go through this. But that's our first understanding of the period of Lag BaOmer seen in the text from from the Gemara. Now, let's so then we go to another this one. So Kulam, and with regard to some more information, Tona, it was taught the Kulam Mesu, that all of these students, Mesu, they died in Pesach Atzeres. They died in the period from Pesach till Atzeres, meaning till Shavuos. That's one opinion, right? And then V'Omer Rab Chama bar Abba V'Isai Rab Chia bar Avin Kula Mesa Misaroi, and they all died a difficult death. And what do we mean by that? So they had so one opinion was Ascaria, which is a type of diphtheria, which obviously a plague of some sort, right? And discussion of that they actually went through these pains of death and what happened. Okay, so let's now looking in how this is brought down in Shulchan Aruch. This period of time, because of that plague and that period of what happened, right? So we look further, and we expressed in the Shulchan Aruch, and now we're looking at the Shulchan Aruch, where the quote is what are we supposed to do in the Omer period. And so therefore, because because negative things happen in that period. So v'negan, it's customary shelo lisa isha, not to marry ben Pesach Latzeres, but ben Pesach L'Shavuos, or at least ad lag ba'ema, up till the lag ba'ema period, mipnei sheba'isa zman, because at that time, at that time, the students in that whole period, Mesa Talmidei Rabbi Akiva, the students of Rabbi Akiva died, and then the Gemara then tells us, however, as preparatory for engagements, like say to do an erison, the Kedushin Shapiri, or that is allowed, and certainly if there's an issue, if somebody wants to go ahead with it, right? So we don't punish him because he might have done it. We have other customs that relate. They are not mourning customs, but they relate to, in some respects, to something similar to, in a status of mourning. So shalei seneg and shalei listaper. So we have a custom not to cut our hair. Ad lag ba'ema till lag ba'ema, and why is that the activities that we do in relationship to the mourning for the students who passed away, because it says she'emim she'oz poskulam obes, because at that time they stopped to die, and so we understand that something that on that day it says that they stopped to die. So this is the addition of the Ramah, and he says that from that period onwards, right? So the Ramah adds over here now from that period like Ba'ema, and further you're allowed to do things, right? So. And then what happens? What should we do if Lag BaOmer turns out to be very if it's close to the Shabbos and you might want to cut your hair? If Lag BaOmer turns out to be on Erev Shabbos, and then you can maybe even you can cut your hair for that purposes. And then, and it says in the Ramah adds in that in our days or in our areas, we'll even cut our hair because marbim b'katsas b'simcha, because we increase in the days of simcha, b'ain emrim b'tachnun, and we don't say the supplication prayers, etc. And we don't get involved in negative things, but we can even be, as he said, ktsas simcha, somewhat aspects of simcha. Okay, so that's our first vision where we see that we can be joyful in the Lag BaOmer period, right? It's the first mention that we've got that we can be simchadik on Lag BaOmer. Okay. Let's look in the next one. This is so this is an introduction. This is an introduction of the reason why Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. So he's only got a small portion of this in over here. So let's just go to this a little bit loaded, a little bit more. So this, okay, so this is the story. So that we'll start. So we're now starting on the story of what happened with Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. Um, um, and as we haven't mentioned yet in our discussion about from the sources about Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, but here this touches on that Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, and then leads us into who and what was Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. Okay, so the Gemara now tells us so an expression someone was called the Rishon Medabrim B'chol Mokom, that someone was called the head of the speakers in every place, and then the Gemara asks the Yesod Rabbi Huda Rabbi, how did that happen? How did that come about? So the Gemara relates. So this resulted as an incident which took place when these people were sitting together. Okay, Posach Rabbi Huda, that in this event, what happened is Rabbi Huda started speaking, and he said, "Kama nayim ma'aser shel umazeh." How good is the benefits that we're getting um, um, from the Romans, from this nation who is now occupied the place of Israel, and Rabbi, he said how good what the Romans have done. What have we got out of it? Tiknu shvachim. They've instituted the idea of that there are marketplaces so that people can find goods and sell goods and do that idea. Tiknu gesharim. They're fixed up or they've built bridges for the land, so they've put in infrastructure. Tiknu marchetzes. So they've made bathhouses, which aid in the health of everything. We'll just go down to the English over there. So Rabbi Yossi, so he was speaking to the benefit of the conquering nation, who was the Romans at that time. Rabbi Yossi was silent. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai responding and said something not as positive, right? Everything that they established only for their own purposes. They established marketplaces to place prostitutes among them, bathhouses to pamper for themselves, bridges so that they can collect taxes from all the Passover. So now this person who was sitting and listening around, right? Yehuda went and related these statements to the household, and then his comments got spread around further, right? Until they were heard by the ruling body. They ruled and they said, well, so the person, Rabbi Yehuda, who elevated the Roman regime, shall be elevated and appointed as head of the sages, head of the speakers. Yossi, who remains silent, well, as a punishment for not sticking up for us, he'll be exiled. And Shimon, right, that's Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, who denounced the government, he shall be killed. So once this edict came out, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai then fled and hid in a nearby study hall. Every day, Shimon's wife would bring him some bread and a jug of water, and they would eat. When the decree intensified, meaning to say that they were searching and they got closer to him, Rabbi Shimon said to his son, women could be forced to talk, and therefore there's room for concern lest the authorities torture her and she reveal our whereabouts so they hid in a cave. Okay, so then Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son hid themselves in a cave. A miracle occurred and a carob tree was created for them, as well as a spring of water. Okay, so from this little story up to this point, we have a custom about connected to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai and Lag BaOmer. From this story, we have a minhag that we eat a carob or part of a carob, right, in remembrance of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. And they continuing the story, they would remove their clothes, sit covered in sand up to their necks. They would study the Torah all day in that manner. In the time of prayer, they would dress, cover themselves, and pray. And then in order to preserve their clothes, they took their clothes off afterwards so they would not become tattered. They sat in this cave for 12 years. Elijah the prophet came and stood at the entrance to the cave and said, it said, it's now time for you to, it's basically made an announcement. So Elijah the prophet came down from heaven and made an announcement and announced to them that who's going to inform Bar Yochai that the emperor has died and his decree has been abrogated. Okay, so part of the story. Um, there's more to this story. I'm not going to read it at this point in time, but there's more. There's there's much to this. There's much to this story that's coming. There's a lot of discussion which relates to the other parts of these stories, miracles which happen in relationship to him, etc. Okay, then a more prominent thing is that that um, that because the miracle had transferred for them and everybody became aware that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was a very holy man, right? He also said, is there something that needs to repair? And they said to him, there is these places, etc., which need repair, a spiritual repair, right? When then the story goes on that how he and how he fixed things up. There's other teachings which relate to that. Okay, I'm going to go back to the original that idea, right? So we see that there is Reb Shimon Bar Yochai had a special aspect, had a special miracles happen to him. He was a very holy person, independent to the Lag BaOmer story. Okay, now, so then post that, right? Post that we understand that, and we find that there was more of that thing, and Reb Shimon Bar Yochai's holiness was that he caused great miracles to happen in his lifetime, uh, and then other places we've discussed that, as we saw, Lag BaOmer is a time when the deaths of the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped, and then also it's discussed in this particular thing, Minig Yisrael Asher Talmidiv Boneh Bei Rav. So one particular custom practice on the day of Lag BaOmer is unique. Children go to park, fields to play with bows and arrows. What is this? The reason for this particular different custom, right? One well-known explanation has to do with the fact that during Reb Shimon's lifetime, no rainbow ever appeared in the sky. And this is profoundly significant because Genesis relates that the rainbow represents God's covenant never to destroy the world again, even if the human race would denigrate so stop. So when it does show, it shows something negative. When it and when it doesn't show, it shows something positive. And it was positive in that in Reb Shimon's lifetime, no rainbow ever appeared in the sky. So that showed that in his era there was a level of protection that the righteousness of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was reflected. So continuing, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was the one who then taught texts of the hidden parts of Torah, the mystical parts of Torah, and that the day that he passed away is the day of Lag BaOmer. The day that he passed away on Lag BaOmer, as it says at the day of his passing, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai said, on this day that he passes away, there shouldn't be any mourning, and the two things are thus correlated about Lag BaOmer and the students of Rabbi Akiva. This shows us or points to us that this day was a day of great was a day of great holiness. So on this day, on this day itself, we say that this is such a day of holiness, of an expression that many miracles can happen. The holy people and the tzaddikim, the righteous in our generations, have shown us that and have told us that Lag BaOmer is a day of miracles in commemoration of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was is noted as one of the great sages, but not just a great sage, but a very holy sage, and that in his uniqueness, Rabbi Akiva said about him that I know, and only Hashem knows, only between your teacher, meaning Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Shimon know what a great righteous person you are. So in commemoration of all of those things, we have the idea of Lag BaOmer and the holiness of the day that's expressed there. Okay, so it doesn't that doesn't tell us anything further. Okay, so that is the day. That is the special day, the holiness of this day. This is a day for us itself as well, that we can promote special things for. This is an idea of Ahavas Yisrael, and special things for deferring things for them. So they're special blessings, special opportunity for special blessings on this day. So as we said, there's two aspects to Lag BaOmer. Is the aspect of the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped. We saw one reference where it stopped. One reference sort of said that it paused. Notwithstanding whether it was one or the other, that was a very positive thing. And also it's the day of the passing of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, who instructed us that this should be a day of celebration. Many of the holy sages take that custom, as I mentioned that, and I'll show you the idea of eating a carob or part of a carob to commemorate how Reb Shimon Bar Yochai was sustained but miraculously by the tree that sprouted outside the cave, and also the idea of the children going out into the park, having a park day, and playing with bows and arrows, got to do with the rainbow. This is again commemoration that know about the rainbows and stuff like that. Some places they do a Lag BaOmer parade. You might have heard from time to time. There's a Lag BaOmer parade, and such. They might even do if a person's going to get married, they might do they'll even do a wedding ceremony. They don't do a wedding ceremony in the period of Sfiras Omer, but on Lag BaOmer there's a day of Simcha. So there is that weddings are allowed, and that gives strength to people for doing more things, more positive deeds. Okay, we'll leave the learning part at that. Sfiras Omer, counting, parts of that. All of that is a preparation tool. Refining ourselves and becoming, being better and more positive, and the culmination of the 49 days is the 50th day, which then is the day of Shavuos. Okay,
Yeah.
The day of receiving of the Torah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I'm happy. I'm happy to resume with you in this sort of way. That's good.